SVGs are one of my favorite things in front-end development, mainly because they're lightweight and versatile. Today, let's look at all the different ways you can put an SVG on a page and some of the reasons why you might reach for one solution over another. If you're new to the Self-Teach Me channel, my name is Amy Dutton. I'm a web designer and developer. If you're just getting into this space, sometimes it's hard to know where to start or what resources to trust. I want to help you level up and get to where you want to be. If this sounds interesting to you, hit the subscribe button below. Hold up. Before we dive into the wonderful world of SVGs, you may want to check out the description below. There's a lot of content in this video and I definitely don't want to waste your time. So I included timestamps for all the concepts I'm going to cover. Feel free to jump around and find what you need. In fact, this video is part one of a multi-part series on SVGs. I'll include links to the other videos and the playlist containing all the videos in the description below. So with that out of the way, you may be wondering, what in the world is an SVG anyway? Well, before we answer that, let's take a step back and talk about images in general. There are two types of images. There are two types of images, a raster and a vector. A raster file is made up of pixels. Think JPEG, GIF, pings. You can always make a raster file smaller, but you can't make it bigger. The computer can't just make up pixels. So this is also why you get blurry images, and resolution matters. Because of the way that a JPEG handles compression, these raster files are great for photos and complicated artwork. On the other hand, a vector file is based on math. The computer knows the coordinates of all the points to be able to draw the lines. You can make a vector file as big or as small as you want since it's all math. Vector files are great for flat artwork and illustrations. They're also great for large items like billboards and posters. So EPS, Illustrator files, SVGs, these are all vector files. Okay, so let's get practical by looking at an actual design and using some real-world application. Let's pull up the Self-Teach Me homepage. At the very top, we have two images, the hamburger menu and the search icon. These are flat shapes, which is a perfect use case for an SVG. And then this hero image is a giant photo. We want to be mindful of file size and load times. The JPEG is going to provide the best compression. On top of the hero image, we have the logo and some text. And usually I want the logo to be an SVG, since an SVG is a vector file and we can make it as large or as small as we want. We can also change the color within the code, meaning I could use one SVG file to serve several purposes. You could display a white version, a black version, a large version, and a small version. So right there, that's one file and 4 different use cases. An SVG is going to be crystal clear on a retina display, which is what we want when we're talking about branding. The only downside with the Self-Teach Me logo is that it has some texture in it. It looks like a marker wrote it out. And if you look at this file in Illustrator, you can see that there are tons of points to achieve this look. That also means that our SVG has to keep track of all these points. So even though in most cases an SVG is going to be a smaller file size, here it's actually larger. So just for kicks and giggles, let's compare. In Figma, I can select the logo and then click on the export button. And let's use a ping so that we get transparency. And then I'm actually going to add another export, and this will also be a ping, but this time I want to make this 2x for Retina. Then I'm going to export a third file, and this time we will make it an SVG. Now within the Finder, let's look at our file sizes. Yep, this is just what I would have expected. The SVG is 192 kilobytes, which is almost 5 times more than the Retina version of the ping. So when in doubt, export both file types and compare the file sizes. Let's keep moving down our mockup. Next up is my avatar, and since that's a photo, JPEG is going to be best. The next set of images that we come across are these logos for sites that I worked on. Yes, an SVG would be ideal, but I don't have a vector version of these logos. So I'm just going to use what I have and ping it is. Scrolling down, we come to the latest post section. For each post, there's an associated image. And since these are photos, a JPEG is going to give us the best compression. But the icon next to the video text and the arrow on the read article button are perfect use cases for SVGs. We can reuse these throughout the site, changing the size and the color. In the email sign up section, I have an emoji, and this could be text, but you have to remember that emojis don't always display the same way across multiple platforms. PCs and Androids have their own emoji set. Plus, on older machines, they might not have emojis at all. So in order to make sure that everything looks correct across the board, this is actually an image. And in order to get transparency, this is, you guessed it, a ping. So here at the bottom, the only other images I have is this X between the nav items and the social media icons at the very bottom. What do you think? Let's go through the same process as we did before and export these files. I'm going to export the YouTube logo as 2 pings and an SVG. So this is interesting. Our SVG is actually bigger than the 1X version. So you might be tempted to use that ping, but let me remind you, you'd actually need both pings, one for normal display and one for Retina, which is a larger file size and would mean multiple HTTP requests. Besides, part of the beauty of an SVG is that you can use one file for multiple instances and colors. So if we jump over the contact page, you'll see that I'm using these same icons, big and pink. If we're using pings, we need to export another set of icons for this page, but with an SVG, it can handle both of these use cases. So now that we know what an SVG file is and we've reviewed some use cases, let's get it on the page. There are 7 ways. Before you panic, think of this as a good thing. You can have one file with multiple options for implementation. It really just depends on your use case. And don't get overwhelmed. I've created a cheat sheet that lists out all 7 ways and the pros and cons to each. So check out the description below for a link. The first way is within an image tag, and this is similar to any other type of image. For these code examples, I'm going to use CodePen. If you've never used CodePen before, it's a website that has a free code sandbox. It's great for when you want to experiment or share code examples. We won't be using any JavaScript today, so the first thing that I'm going to do is click on this down arrow and minimize our JavaScript panel. So I have a pro account, which gives me the ability to upload files. So I'm going to click on the Assets button here at the bottom. I'm just going to drag and drop an SVG of the CodePen icon. Now I can click on the Copy As button and select Copy URL. Now within my HTML, I can write out a simple image tag and paste our URL within the source attribute. Sweet. So this was really easy and it works just like a regular image. The only thing about using an SVG within an image tag is that you don't get all the benefits. Yes, the resolution will look great and you can change the size, but you can't change the color. The next option we have is to just display the SVG text directly on the page. If I open up my SVG file within VS Code, you'll see that it's just a bunch of text. But we can copy and paste this directly into CodePen. And it looks like nothing changed. But let's look at the contents of this file a little more closely. You'll see that it has a width and height. There's a view box, and those numbers actually correspond with the width and height. And I never, and I mean never, mess with this because it's what helps maintain the correct aspect ratio as we change the size. Then there are 2 path tags. One is for the circle outline and one is for the box, a pin inside. These tags have attributes that list out a bunch of weird numbers and letters. These are the coordinates, and the math it uses to tell the browser what to draw. Then lastly, you may have noticed there's a fill attribute, and this contains the hexadecimal value for the color. So within an inline SVG, we do have the ability to change the color within the code. We can change it directly within the fill attribute, or we can do it within CSS. But first, if you're going to modify it within the CSS, you need to remove the fill attribute from the SVG. The attribute on the SVG is similar to having an inline CSS style tag. It will override whatever we put in our style sheet. So to prevent that from happening, we'll need to remove it altogether. So within our CSS, we can target it as an SVG. So we'll need to remove our fill attributes. Then within our CSS, we can target this as an SVG. Even though you might be tempted to reach for color, we will actually use the fill property, and let's say purple. You can also put a class on our SVG, and this is helpful if you have multiple SVGs on the page and you want to target a specific one. So we can put the class on the SVG itself. or on the path tag. So I can move this here. So what's the difference? Well, remember we have two paths within this particular SVG tag. We could color one path differently than the other, animate a specific path, or hide it altogether. In which case, we need to put a different class on each path so that we can control each component individually. In fact, in another video, I created a Wi-Fi component where we use an SVG to color and animate each of the parts individually. Link in the card above. I don't know which side the card's coming on. I want both paths to be treated the same. So in this case, I would add the same class to both paths. Before we move on, I want to show you a little trick. Let's make this icon link to CodePen. Within our HTML, I'm going to wrap our SVG with an A tag. And then let's also include some text next to our icon so that people will know this is a CodePen logo. If we were to write out the CSS for this, we might target the A tag and give this a color of blue. Then when we hover over our link, give it a color of green. Then our SVG, we might want it to have a fill of blue. And then when we hover over our link, we change our SVG to green as well. Unless you want the colors to be different, this is a little redundant, don't you think? You'd be right. We've listed blue twice and we've listed green twice. Well, in CSS, there's a little thing called currentColor that will help us out. We can get rid of our hover SVG styles and change our fill on our SVG to say currentColor. And this will adopt whatever color we've defined for this section. So for us, that's these link styles. So let's test it out. It still works. Okay, if we change the links color in our CSS, the SVG will change colors too. And one more thing, as I mentioned, when you're styling an SVG, you use the fill property to fill in shapes, but there's also a stroke property. So sometimes your SVGs will use lines and borders. And to change these, you'll need to reach for the stroke property. So just for funsies, I'm going to add a stroke property to our SVG. Cool. Coolio. As usual, I've included a link to my CodePen in the description below. Feel free to fork it and snag the code inside. If you like this video and want to see more videos on web design and development, be sure to hit the subscribe button below. Hit the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos are posted. Until then, keep coding.